Congrats, you've made it to the end. This is the last video in this topic where we'll be having a look at pseudo-elements. We'll be discussing what are pseudo-elements, the pseudo-elements for text styling, selection, and content insertion. Put in your dancing shoes, let's get the party started. So what are pseudo-elements? Pseudo-elements are used to style a specific part of an element. They're not to be confused with pseudo-classes, which we saw was used to style a specific state of an element, like hovering over an anchor tag. Let's look at the syntax for a pseudo-element. We have a selector, like an H2, and then we add on our pseudo-element, which is made up of a double colon and the pseudo-element name. Now, just a small note at this point, pseudo-elements are not overly common. I'm not going to be using them throughout the course, but I do just want you to know that they do exist in case you see them out there in the wild. When I first learned CSS, I felt very overwhelmed with all the selectors I'd learnt, and especially scary worded ones like pseudo-classes and pseudo-elements. Pseudo-classes are very, very important. You always use them on anchor tags. Pseudo-elements are not that common, so don't stress too much about them. So let's now have a look at different pseudo-selectors. The first group of pseudo-selectors have to do with text styling, where they're used to enhance visual appearance of text. The first example of this is the first letter pseudo-element, which, as the name suggests, will target the first letter inside a text element like a heading or paragraph, and this gives us something called a drop cap, which you can see in my image here, where the first letter will be larger than the rest. This kind of styling you'll often see in some publications like books or magazines. The other text styling pseudo-element is first line, which, as the name suggests, targets the first line of text, and often this will be a paragraph opening line, as a paragraph usually contains multiple lines of text. So let's play around with these in VS Code. I've prepared this index.html file ahead of time. It's got my boilerplate code and just an h1 and paragraph element. I've also linked an app.css style sheet, which is currently empty. So let's use the first letter pseudo-element to target this paragraph. I'll use the p-type selector, add 2 colons, and then add the pseudo-element name, first letter. I'll grab our curly brackets, and let's add some styles. A common one would be text transform to uppercase. This will give us that capital letter as the first letter. Let's make the font size 30 pixels, and let's give it a font weight of 700. Let's check this out in the browser. So you can see in our paragraph, the L over here, which is the first letter of the paragraph, is uppercase. It's got a larger font size of 30 pixels, and it's got a font weight of 700. And as I said before, this is called a drop cap. I'm going to comment out this style. Let's go add the other pseudo-element we saw. I'll again grab the paragraph, add 2 colons, and this time we're going to be using the first line pseudo-element. I'll grab our curly brackets, and let's just use the same styles here. I'll copy them and paste them here. Let me refresh the browser, and you can see now the first line is all uppercase, has a font size of 30 pixels, and has a font weight of 700. So text styling with pseudo-elements targets specific parts of the element. We saw first letter, and now first line. The next type of pseudo-element is selection. This is used to visually enhance the text a user selects. And as you guessed, the pseudo-element name is selection. Let's play around with this one in VS Code. I'm going to get rid of these styles. I'm going to grab the paragraph again, add my double colons, and add the pseudo-element name selection. Add curly brackets, and let's give this a color of red. Let's see what this does in the browser. So initially, it doesn't look like any change. To see the selection pseudo-element in action, we need to go and highlight the text. So I'm going to grab my cursor and select the text as if I'm going to copy it. And you can see it's turning red. So that's selection in action. The last pseudo-element type is content insertion. This is used for adding decorative elements without altering the HTML structure. There are 2 content insertion pseudo-elements. The first is before, and the second is after. As you could guess, using before adds the decorative elements before the HTML element you're targeting, and after adds the insertion after the element you're targeting. Let's have a look at this inside VS Code. Looking back on the HTML file, what I'd like to do is on my H1, I'd like to have a little beta symbol to signify that this application is in beta. Now, I don't really want that beta to be part of my HTML markup. It's kind of more like a little decorative element. It doesn't really make sense to have that inside my HTML structure. So I can use the before and after property to inject that element when the page renders. Heading over to app.css, I'm going to get rid of this style. I'm going to grab the h1, add 2 colons, and I'm going to use the after pseudo element. This will add the decorative element that I'm adding here after the h1. Now, a common property to use inside the before and after pseudo element is content. And we use quotation marks to write the content we want to appear. In this case, the word beta. And then we just use regular CSS text properties, like font size, which I'll make 12 pixels, and color, which I'll make purple. So let's see what this looks like in the browser. So you can see the word beta has been inserted into the page after my h1 heading. Now, usually you'd want to style this a bit more. You'd probably want to move it, say a little bit up and left, and also maybe give it a background color. Now, we can't do those things just yet because we need to learn more about positioning and the CSS box model, but you could imagine how this would look on a final page. And again, just to reiterate the subtlety of this beta is not actually an HTML element. It's being injected into the page when it renders. We can see this in DevTools as well. If I go into the heading, you can see welcome to the app, which is our heading text, and the pseudo element after, which has the properties we defined in our CSS. So let's finish the video off completing the summary card, inheritance, and the universal selector. In this video, we looked at pseudo-elements, which styles a specific part of an element. We had a selector, like an h2, which was then followed by 2 colons and the pseudo-element name, like first letter. This gave us a pseudo-element. Don't forget, you can download all the summary cards and presentation slides from the bootcamp in the link in the description below. Congratulations, you've reached the end of this topic, CSS selectors, as part of the CSS section of the course. Hi, I'm Dan and thanks for watching. I was like you not too long ago. Eager to learn how to code, I was trying my best to teach myself. My journey was a frustrating one. To get a solid base, I had to jump between different YouTube playlists, Udemy courses, online tools, and the occasional book to connect the dots. Having been through this, I realized how much easier it would have been if there was just one course by one excellent teacher that comprehensively covered everything you needed to know in a fun and engaging way. That's why I created Future Fullstack, the world's best online full-stack web development bootcamp. It's a mammoth and detailed course by one dude, where together we'll conquer the steep learning curve and get you the solid foundation in full-stack web development needed to kick off your career or launch your dream web app. To continue watching the selection of videos that are uploaded on YouTube, click the playlist here. And click here to subscribe to the channel to get updates on new releases. And if you are serious about learning full-stack web development, then head on over to futurefullstack.com to learn more about my full course. See you in the next video.